Is inflation really 20%, the true rate of inflation? When you look at the higher cost of things like food and transportation and housing, is that what's really going on here? Stick around, and by the end of this video, you'll understand why inflation is worse than you think, what you can actually do about inflation in order to profit from it, and thirdly, how to predict the future direction of the stock and crypto markets. People almost look shocked when they leave the grocery store today. They're almost like, hey, what just happened to me inside there? Now, do you think inflation is actually 15 to 20%? Because you yourself, you see the prices in the grocery store and at the gas pump and in rents and everywhere else. It's actually really difficult to measure inflation accurately. Now, the government recently reported that it's 8.6% annually. That dashed hopes that it's peaked. That was the highest level in 40 years. But as I like to say, that is only the level of inflation that the government is willing to admit to. It's really higher than that. I mean, from 40 years ago, you can see how that they have changed and diluted and really perverted the CPI with things like changing the weighting of the basket of goods in there and using tactics like substitution to dilute the real diminished purchasing power of the dollar, which is actually what you're concerned with. So inflation is actually really hard to measure when you get into it. You can look at a site like Shadow Stats if you really want to dig in deep to that. But no, almost any economist will tell you that the real rate of inflation is not just 8 to 9%. So by the government's own admission, though, inflation has now been greater than 8% for 3 months in a row. Treasury Secretary Janet Grandma Yellen has already warned about what she calls unacceptable levels of inflation. That's exactly what she called it after months ago sort of downplaying the problem. Yes, Yellen kind of looks like my grandma Weinhold. One difference is that my grandmother was never wrong about inflation. Another is that Janet Yellen never gave me Star Wars action figures for Christmas. For a lot of people, especially in the lower middle class, it's actually become a scary world with $5 plus gas, soaring food prices, spiking rents. The medical system is still a mess. And at the same time, through all this, people's wages are up maybe 5%. Their quality of life is really suffering now. Now, libertarians sometimes point out that inflation of fiat currency is really like theft of private property. You went out and earned this dollar, and now it's being slowly stolen from you. Sneaky shrinkflation is stealing from you as well at the same time. Are you even noticing these sorts of things? See, Gatorade has trimmed its 32-ounce bottles down to just 28 ounces. You're not imagining this stuff. A small box of Kleenex has shrunk from 65 tissues down to 60. And of course, this is never splashed across the product box or package. It's not even mentioned at all. It's sneaky. Package sizes are shrinking faster than Lake Powell, all while producers charge the same price or more. That's what shrinkflation is. It's become an awful economic malady for consumers. But see, higher interest rates, that can reduce soaring inflation. And if you're not sure how that works, check out my explainer video here, where in just 6 steps, I tell you why higher interest rates tamp down on inflation. Increasing rates crimps the money supply, and then there's less money to run up the prices of things. Now, many interest rates are based off of the federal funds rate. So let's call this the base interest rate in this case. Understand that rewinding just about 3 years back into early 2019, the federal funds rate was hiked up to 2.5% at that time. And that made the stock market freak out and fall. And President Donald Trump, he actually demanded a rate cut at that time, and whether that was the right thing to do or not, there was a rate cut and the stock market recovered. Now that's what happened, and that's how much the world freaked out when interest rates were 2.5% at the Fed funds level. But here's the thing. This year, interest rates have only been hiked up to 1.5%, and stocks and cryptocurrency markets are already freaking out. Their prices have taken a swan dive off the high board. And everyone expects that rates are going to be up at 2% by July. So what do you think is going to happen to the stock and cryptocurrency market by then? How are they going to like that? Hey, speaking of like, go ahead and put a like on this YouTube video if you like this. Hey, would that create inflation in the number of likes? I don't think there's any problem with that. I'd really appreciate the likes. Well, here's the thing. Raising rates, that has the effect of reduced demand. What's another name for the reduction in demand? A recession. But see, history shows us that even when rates are hiked up to 10%, it can still take a lot of years in order to quell inflation. Now, a lot of people have pointed out that they think that the tech run-up is over and the commodities run-up is just beginning. See, this summer, people want to get out again and travel and experience vacations, and that effect really has been headlined with $120 a barrel price of oil and all the downstream effects that that has in the economy. Some feel that the price of a barrel of oil could reach $200 or even $300 in the near term. So in either inflationary or recessionary times, three things that typically excel are housing, food, and energy. These things have a finite supply, and in fact, bringing more of them into existence, that takes proof of work. Proof of work is actually a concept used in the Bitcoin world, and what that means is that it takes real world resources in order to produce things. We're talking about framing roof trusses, or growing timber for lumber, or mining gold, or extracting oil, or growing wheat. It takes proof of work to produce those things. Now, if you held any of those commodities individually, what you might do is merely hedge yourself against inflation, a defensive position. But if you can control an entire commodity by only putting a down payment of 1/4 or 1/5 of the whole amount into it, what you're doing is shorting the dollar. Shorting is just a term from the stock world, which means that you are betting that something is going to go down. In this case, when you borrow, you're making a bet that the dollar is going to go down. A really safe bet today. Now you're creating leverage and arbitrage. Now you're really profiteering. And real estate is like a basket of commodities. It is made up of lumber and petroleum products and concrete, steel, aluminum, copper, gypsum, plastics, glass, brick, and myriad other commodities, all in a piece of real estate, a property. So of course you wouldn't be over here saving a lot of dollars because their purchasing power is getting diminished fast, maybe as high as 20% per year now. There's a substantial opportunity cost in saving dollars. Well, oppositely, when you borrow dollars, since you're compelled to do the opposite of save, when you borrow responsibly, you get to pay those back with cheaper inflated dollars over time. So look, if you have, say, $1 million in total real estate debt, whether that's in your own home and your rental properties, that's now being debased at a rate by the government's admission of 8.6%, while the tenants pay your mortgage. That's a great deal. So look, this increased your prosperity $86,000 in just the past year, and that doesn't even include all the other ways that you're paid with something like real estate. The other ways being appreciation, cash flow, the loan pay down made by the tenant, and the tax benefits. Do you remember back in 2019, I did a podcast episode. It was episode number 260, and that was called the Debt Decamillionaire. You might remember that episode. And by the way, go ahead and get your phone and grab the free Get Rich Education podcast or Get Rich Education app if you want to get a free education about all this stuff on the go. That program is different than this program. That's how you can listen while you're boating or biking or whatever else you're doing. So back there in 2019, that podcast episode, the Debt Decamillionaire, that refers to when I touted the counterintuitive merits of having $10 million in real estate debt, if you're able to get that much, while all the payments, of course, are outsourced to tenants. For those able to implement that plan, that has now created an extra $860,000 of prosperity to you in just the last year, and that's one of only 5 ways that you're paid. That's astounding. So really, why is someone compelled to be a real estate investor today in this climate? I mean, look, if you're a lawyer or an engineer or an accountant or a social worker or a medical worker or an Uber driver, why can't you just work hard and then you'll have some savings left over, and then you can just either save that in a savings account or in stocks or bonds or CDs or ETFs. Like, why can't you do that? And then you can retire off those savings someday. And the reason why that doesn't work anymore is because the dollar store of value has been badly broken. You know, to just sort of save or store dollars like that, in a sense, it seems reasonable, it seems totally plausible, but you're setting yourself up for a loss in prosperity and a really hazy future. So that truth is kind of a downer. I mean, if you're like truly uninitiated on this stuff, that wouldn't exactly make for the most compelling and motivating TED Talk now, would it? So is real estate still underpriced? Yeah, I said underpriced. I think that's a question at least worth asking. Now, real estate is up some 16% year over year now. Oh, well, if that's about the real rate of inflation, then real estate hasn't gone up in real terms at all. It hasn't gone up at all if we're comparing it to dollars. And then the mortgage rates, though they're up off the bottom, they're historically low. The long-term average on mortgage rates is about 7.5%. On top of that, housing is in a savagely undersupplied condition. So this is why real estate could very well be underpriced. So I've got some solution-based news. GREmarketplace.com is our resource that we've carefully put together to help you find income-producing properties in investor advantage markets, and it's where I buy my real estate myself. One highlight there is our provider in Ocklawaha, Florida has off-market new construction income properties for, you might have a hard time believing this, under $215,000. With a price like that, did you think that you just entered a time machine and went back to the year 2015? These 3-bed, 2-bath homes are near Ocala, Florida, which was just named the #6 fastest growing place in America by U.S. News and World Report. And quality tenants love the natural surroundings between Lake Weir and the Ocala National Forest, and yet it's a really short drive to the booming Ocala job market. Just don't try spelling Ocklawaha in Scrabble. That name comes from the river that runs through it. I doubt that prices are ever going to be this low again, so this one's really a special opportunity to own in a rapidly growing area. So GRE Marketplace, just create one login, one time, and you'll have access to all of our preferred providers. And this particular one is in the Greater Orlando section over there. I've got a tutorial video over there too on navigating around, so continue on with me at GREmarketplace.com. I'm Keith Weinhold. I'll see you next time.